Okay, looks like we have two people tonight joining in live. So thank you to the both of you for tuning in to the live session. Just really quickly, going to go over sort of the stuff for the week. There's not too much in here, and then we're going to jump into Enscape again and talk a little bit about presentation, drawings, and setting all that up in Revit and all that. So um, it's kind of a loose agenda. I don't have a ton of stuff that I'm planning on going over, so we'll see if we can get out of here a little bit early tonight. Yesterday, I did start grading your Lab 1 assignments, so you can start looking at your grades on Canvas and checking those. And if you notice any issues with like the grades that I'm giving out, like if you notice something that doesn't line up with your submission or something like that, just reach out to me and let me know so that I can take a look at it and fix it if there's anything like that. But just make sure that you're checking them and that you're up to date on your grades, and so that way we don't get to the end and there's like some issue that you didn't catch early on, and then we have to try to figure it out sort of at the end. So make sure you go in and check those grades. I'm about a quarter of the way through the class. Hopefully, this week I'll be able to get through the rest of those. Gonna try to do like 4 or 5 the next couple days each day, just to try to get them all out so that we're up to date. Aside from grading, the only thing that you have to work on currently for this week is the second part of Lab 2, which was that residential renovation. And since you're already doing your studio assignments, that shouldn't be too difficult to just throw together. So get that done. That's going to be due by the end of this week, Sunday at midnight, right before we go on Thanksgiving break. Just get it out of the way. So you'll have this whole week, and that's the only thing that you're going to have to worry about for this class. So if you are still working on it, just take the week to finish it up and get it done by Sunday. Yesterday, the part 1 was due for Lab 2. So hopefully all of you got that turned in. If you have any issues with that, or if you ran into any problems, just reach out, let me know so that we can kind of work through that. But I think that's pretty much it for the stuff this week. So under week 7, all I have is this URL right now, which is just going to show you some of the stuff that I'm going to be covering tonight about presentation drawings. So that's the only thing that we're going to need to reference. Trying to think. Oh, okay. So then, yeah, after I record this lecture tonight, this will be posted up here underneath of week 7 right here, just like I did with last week's. So to those of you watching live, you're not going to have to worry about anything this week after tonight watching me show you this live, but to everybody else, you're going to be seeing this obviously in the video that you're currently watching. All right, so I'm going to open up that link that I posted. So this is just a link to this site that I really like, and they have a really good library of resources for helping you to learn Revit, but also learn how to do cool things in Revit that a lot of other places don't really seem to talk about. So Revit Pure, it's a good website. They also have a YouTube channel, and the guy who runs it does like live videos with people in the industry where they kind of will showcase different techniques and stuff. So I like to tune into those and watch them and pick up tips and tricks here and there. So you can check out his YouTube channel. That's just a really good resource. But this site, he has a blog where he kind of posts cool tips and tricks and stuff like that. So that's what this is. So when you think about presentations for your final projects, that's usually going to be a combination of things that are going on your presentation board. So obviously we're going to think of renderings, right? We want to show the project in a realistic manner and give an idea of what it's actually going to look like built. But another aspect of that is really nice presentation drawings. Okay, so um, drawings that are kind of pulled from your CD set, elevations, floor plans, things like that, that are two-dimensional, but are kind of cleaned up in a nice way that presents well. So, something like this. This is an example of a section perspective. This is one of my favorite types of um, presentation drawing because it really shows off kind of the program of the building really well. And it's just a really interesting type of drawing to look at. So if you ever have a chance to use, something like this in your project, I would. I use these on my senior project a lot, and they just looked really cool on my board. So going to show you how to set something like that up tonight inside of Revit, but then also how we can use what we're setting up for these two-dimensional presentation drawings in Enscape to get something a little bit more realistic too. So going back to kind of the basics of Rep and Viz and just presentation drawings in general, whenever we are putting together a 2D drawing, this is something that you should have learned year one in your introductory studios. Things that make the drawing look good, for example, are line hierarchy. So that's the first thing we're going to have to worry about. Revit, by default, gives us some options for controlling line hierarchy, but usually the things or the settings that they give you out of the box for default line weights aren't usually very adequate, and a lot of people just seem to hate the way that they show up. So you can actually go in under the visibility settings and you can tweak those things. Okay, so we have a line weights control, and like by default you can see this example where there's not a lot of hierarchy, so kind of all the different components on the floor plan, the walls, the windows, the doors, everything are kind of blending together and nothing is standing out. You don't get that sense of depth where you can glance at it and it's kind of easier to read. So by modifying the line weights to kind of the settings that he's showing here, you get kind of this second image where the walls are really jumping out at you now, and it's a lot easier to differentiate. Okay, so that's kind of the first thing that you're going to think about when you're setting up these drawings. The second thing is going to be visual style. So on your viewports inside of Revit, down in the bottom corner, there is an option to change how the viewport is showing the model. So the one that you're most used to is hidden line mode. That's the default one. But then you have like these other 5 options too. The ones that I like to use the most are probably consistent colors or shaded. Those are just going to take the settings from your materials under the graphics tab. So when you're in the material editor, you get these different tabs, and you're probably pretty used to using the appearance tab. That's how you set up how the material is going to render. The graphics tab gets overlooked a lot, and that's kind of just 2D information. So like hatch patterns, fill patterns, colors, things like that. Those are going to show up in shaded views and consistent color views. Realistic views, that is going to pull from the appearance tab in the material, and it's actually going to show the textures. So if you have JPEGs and things like that, like I showed you last week with setting up the materials, it's going to show the texture in your 3D Revit view. Okay. And then the last one is ray trace, and I'm not even going to talk about it because it's not worth using because it's trash. So don't touch it. Basically, it uses the built-in Revit renderer to try to make it look like a realistic rendered thing, but it looks terrible. So don't even ever touch that. And if you do, it just like slows your computer. Like if you accidentally hit ray trace, it'll bring Revit to a crashing halt. So don't touch ray trace is my advice. So yeah, here you can see a little bit. He's breaking down the differences. So consistent colors, that's going to pull like the wood slat hatch pattern and also the solid fill color for that wood slat. and then realistic is actually going to show the JPEG for the wood slat and also the brick here. So you can see there's a brick JPEG versus a brick hatch pattern. Well, my advice for you, I probably would stay away from realistic as well, kind of depending on what you're going for. I would leave realistic views up to Enscape to render out for you because they're going to look way better. This like weird faux realistic thing that Revit tries to do, just it doesn't look that great. So I wouldn't really also use realistic if you're putting together your presentation board. It's nicer to look at something that's more like graphical, in my opinion, and then let Enscape handle the realistic side. So graphical would be shaded mode or consistent colors, and you're going to get something that looks a little bit more like a drawing. Okay. Next thing is your graphic overrides. So the graphic overrides, those are basically the settings that you mess with to change what's showing up on your different views. So if you wanted to hide your dimensions, for example, you would open up the graphic overrides either on its own by hitting like VV or VG on your keyboard, or you would be going into the view template assigned to the view and you would be changing it there. But you're basically changing the way that elements are drawn in each specific type of view, okay? So within there, we have options to override sort of the projection or surface and also the cut pattern. Okay, so in this example here that they're showing, and I'll zoom in a little bit so it's a little easier to see, you can kind of see that they have these diagonal cut patterns going through all of their walls and floors and ceilings and roofs and all that. And that's simply done by modifying the visibility settings here. So right here you have this section that says cut, and you can see under cut we have lines and we have patterns. Overriding the line is going to change the way that this border draws. So you can see how it's kind of a thick black outline around the floor here. That is what this is going to control, the cut line. Okay, so you would click on, if you want to do the walls, you would click right here and then you'd choose override. And then the pattern is going to be that diagonal hatch. So you would click on this here next to walls to override it and assign that hatch pattern. The projection pattern, that's what you're seeing on objects that are not cut. So in this example, if I were to override the wall projection pattern right here, so projection, pattern, wall, click there, I could set a hatch pattern to show, like, for example, on these faces of the wall. Okay, so anything that's like 2D in front of you that's not being cut through, that is what your projection and surface override is going to control. Okay, and then we get our different options actually when we get into the override settings of what we want to set up, if we want it to be like a solid color or if we want it to be a pattern. So a nice thing to do, which I'm going to show you, is usually when you're cutting through stuff like in a section view, you want to set up just a solid colored fill. So you can see in this example, he just set all of those objects that are being cut through to a solid black, and it really cleans it up and shows the person, you know, what is being cut through and what's not being cut through. So it's very clear. You can also do things like adding shadows to your views, and you can change the intensity of the shadows. So you can see he turned on shadows, and you can change the angle as well, so they're casting from the upper right hand corner. But then you can dial that back so it's just very subtle, and then it just adds even more depth. Additionally, we have ambient shadows. So ambient shadows are kind of like the soft shadows in the corners. And you can kind of see the difference there without them and with them. It just adds so much depth to the drawing and really makes it pop off the sheet. What else do we have? So this setting here, smoothing lines, that's just something specific to your Revit viewport. That's not something that's going to affect the way that it's going to be printed out. I don't believe. Pretty sure not. But I do like to have that on so that it just cleans this up and it doesn't look so jaggedy when you're looking at it. And then custom entourage. So this is also something I'm going to be showing you tonight. So entourage is basically the word for all the decorations, essentially, the things that make your drawings look pretty, right? So anything like people or um, trees, plants, stuff like that. They're going to be putting in to kind of spruce up the drawing to just make it look a little bit more interesting. So a really good way to make your drawings look better is to use something custom, not out of the box, because the stuff that comes out of the box with Revit is garbage. Okay, so you don't want to touch it. If you really want your stuff to look good, avoid anything that is just built into Revit that you're loading in from the library that came with it. Okay, so I'll show you a good way to go about doing that, and it's kind of what this is showing here, right? By default, they kind of all look the same, the cutouts for the people, and they're very lifeless, but we can very easily add our own in, okay? Kind of the same stuff. So this is kind of your order of operations of the things that you're going to think about with setting these up. And this is kind of the priority that Revit looks at all these components in terms of overrides. I'll let you read into that. Not too important for what we're focused on at the moment. Oh, and then you can do things like override colors. So if you have a view that's like this would be an example of a hidden line view where it doesn't have any color tied to the surfaces, you can actually override and add in color and hatch patterns, which in some cases makes it look a little bit more interesting. So if there was, for instance, something in an elevation view that you wanted to highlight, like a custom designed component that you built in Rhino or something, for example, and you wanted that to really pop out and make a statement to whoever is viewing your presentation board, you could override that so that it stands out from everything around it. Kind of interesting. So that's what that is. Okay, so you can go through and read that in more detail if you want. But basically, I'm going to be going through now and showing you how to do all the stuff that this article is talking about inside of Revit, and then also some things tied in with Enscape a little bit. Okay? All right, so before I start, if anybody has any questions, you can interrupt me or you can kind of throw them in the chat and I'll answer them. Can be anything related to Studio or related to this class, but if you have anything, now would be a good time before I kind of get started here. Yep, go ahead. Mm-hmm. Okay. Mm-hmm. All right, let's take a look at that. So for the replay, because that what you just said was not recorded, the question was, how do we go about modifying room tags and editing out kind of the box surrounding them so that they don't take up as much space in the floor plan? All right, let me create a new project really quick. Put in a room in here, and then here's my room. So you're talking about this box here? Okay. So for that, if we edit the type, okay, show room number. So that's probably just going to get rid of it. Okay. So let's edit the room tag family. And there should be a way underneath the label. Okay, so the show border option I think is what does it. I'm trying to remember how to control that in the project. You should be able to just override that. What we might have to do, Let's see if it's in here. So if I go down to my family section, sometimes Revit likes to bury settings for things down here, which is very unintuitive and you wouldn't know it. But if I look for my annotations and I find my room tag in here, if I right click on it, actually let's go, right here is the actual family, and then these are the types that are built into the family. So if you right click on this, you can go to the type properties. So it's not there either. Yeah, that is annoying. All right, let me go back to the family really quick. Okay, so that's for the room number. Okay. Yeah, that's a tough one. This one I will have to get back to you on, because that's weird. Well, you know what? I'm wondering if, let me try this really quick. Let's go to, let me try creating a new label. And then if it works, I'll explain to you what I just did. So that's the number. Yeah, I'll figure it out. I'll be able to figure it out after this, but yeah, I have no idea at the moment. That's a weird one. Anything else? Yep, I actually just helped somebody out with this. So the question for this one is, how do we edit out the name of the view from the elevation marker on the plan, right? So if I create an elevation marker, view elevation, and I set that to be interior. So you're talking about this right here? Okay. So that, we want to click on the elevation marker and then go to edit type. And then to change it, you have to go here where it says elevation tag and click on these dots. And then this is where you change that. So right now it's set to circle body, filled arrow, and view name. So you just want to go to the one that says filled arrow and then click apply, and then it's going to go away. So now when you place on the sheet, it'll just have the sheet number and then the number of the view. All right, cool. Anybody else? All right, So we'll go back to our Enscape stuff. Okay, so when we're setting up our views, something that you're going to want to do is you're going to want to create a section in your project browser. And I don't have this set up in here right now because this is just like the default Enscape project that they give me. So my project browser isn't organized at all. But if you remember back to when we covered the custom templates and we set up our project browser to be easier to navigate for our project, we broke this out into the different types of plans. So like finished plan, working plan, construction plan, all the different, specific types of views that we're worried about. You're going to want to go in and add another one for presentation views. So maybe one for a presentation plan, presentation elevation, presentation section, something like that, just so that it's organized under like a category over there to make it a little bit easier on yourself so you're not like jumping all over the place. But once you set that up, you can go ahead and you can start setting these views up to make them look good. So I'm going to show you how to do the section perspective, and this is going to apply the exact same to any floor plan view or elevation view. Okay, so whatever I'm doing here, I'm going to do it for this one type of view, but you can do it for all the rest. So I'm going to create my section marker first, and actually no, I'll leave that one in there. I'm just going to create a new one. So here's my section. I'm just going to put it right here, cutting longitudinally through the house. And then I'm going to go to it. Okay, so by default, when you have nothing set up in terms of graphic overrides, your views are going to look very, very messy because there's a lot going on. So what you want to do is start working on your view template just like you did with all of your other views that are in your CD set. So I want to identify right now the things that I don't want to see in the view. And actually, before I start modifying the view template, if we're doing an elevation or a section view, we want to make sure that our extents of the view are cropped correctly. So a section, for example, if I would click on the section marker, you see the blue line that comes out, which is indicating this blue dash line. That's indicating like the crop extents of the view. And by default, they usually extend like way, way out. So it's actually showing me what I'm cutting through here and then everything like way off in the distance, which I don't really care about. I only care about the house itself. So anything back to this back wall. So I'm going to crop that in to cut all the extra stuff in the background out. Okay, so once I do that, there's a lot less going on in the background already. Next thing that I'm going to do, I like to switch over to a view that's not just black and white so I can kind of get a better idea of what's going on. So if I switch over to shaded down here, right there, just switch it to shaded. It's a little bit easier for me to see what's going on now. So in this case, things that I don't want to see would be like these grids. Okay, so I want to get rid of my grids. I want to get rid of my level indicators. You could leave those in if it's important to show. But I kind of don't really like how the default Revit ones look. They look kind of ugly. So that might be something that you take out and then you add in like an Illustrator or InDesign later so that it looks nicer. So we definitely want to get rid of those. We're going to want to get rid of possibly the topography. So that would be the ground here. Or we could maybe keep it in, we'll see. And then maybe some of these like Enscape assets. So the Enscape things by default that you bring in from the asset library here, so all the people and stuff, they look good in 3D and Enscape, but in Revit views they look really, really bad. Okay, so they show up like all triangulated and no materials or anything. So you definitely want to hide those in a presentation view because they just look ugly. So what we're going to do is actually create like a 2D person that looks nice in Revit views, but then also looks good in Enscape um, using the 3D Enscape people. So, okay, now that I've kind of established what I want to get rid of, we're going to make a view template for my presentation view and start modifying it. So over in the view template section, I'm going to click on this to create a new one. And you're going to have a list in here by default of pre-made view templates. And you can usually use one of these and tweak it to get it how you want. So if I were to click architectural elevation, for example, and hit apply, I can see what that view template does, and if I like what it's doing, I can work off of it. But if not, I could try one of these other ones and see if it gets me a little bit closer. So that one's a little bit much. None of these really do what I want. So what I'm going to do is start with architectural elevation, and then I'm going to duplicate it. It's very annoying. You can't just create one from scratch. You have to start with one and then duplicate it. So I'm going to call this one presentation. Whoops. Section. Okay. Hit apply. And then I'm going to start out by taking things out of the model category. So right here under VG overrides model, I'm going to start out by taking out the grids. So if I go to grids, which I think is under annotation. Yep, so under annotation here, I'll uncheck grids. Those go away. Then we'll do levels. Uncheck that, goes away. And then if I go back here really quickly, these Enscape assets that are in here, these are assigned to planting families. That's the category that's tied to them. So if we don't want to show these, if we don't want to show all of them in the view, which in my case, I really don't want to show any of these in my view, we can take those out by hiding planting in the view template like I just was. Another thing that you can do if there's, say I want to show that category, but I only want to hide an individual thing, you just click on the thing you want to hide, and then you right click and you go to hide in view elements, and it's just going to hide that individual element, right? But in this case, I'm just going to hide all the planting because it looks really bad. So going back to my view template, whoops. If I can find where I did with it, there it goes. We'll go to planting and we'll uncheck that. All that crap goes away, which is good. And then, let me think, is there anything else in here that I don't really want to see? I think that's pretty good. If I didn't want to see the ground and stuff, I could get rid of topography. But in this case, I think I'll leave it in for now. Okay, so there's my initial start. And then I'm going to go ahead and start cropping this view in a little bit. Okay. So that's how we can start getting a 2D view to look good. Now, if we want to make this a little bit more interesting and not just do a flat 2D view for our presentation, we start with this section that I made and we convert it over to a 3D view to get the section perspective. So to do that, what you want to do is go to a plan view. And let me see what I named that really quick. What was the section I was just in? I think that was section 2. Right here. I'm going to rename this, and I'll just call this presentation section. Whoops. Okay. Then if I go back to my floor plan, actually I want the ground floor. We just want to create a camera view like that. So you hit the little house and you click on camera. And I'm going to start the camera view behind my section extending through the house. So the first click is going to be roughly right here in the middle of the house in front of it. And then I'm going to drag, and my second click is just going to be extending somewhere through the house like this. So then I click there. And then that's going to take me to like a really zoomed in, weird perspective of my project. The next thing that you do is you go up here to the view cube. Okay, so this little thing here. And you can actually right click on this, and you can choose orient to view. And then you find the view that you want to lock it to. So I'm going to choose my section. And right here under section, I have my presentation section. So when I click on this, it's going to take this 3D view and it's going to look at my 2D section that I just made, and it's going to match it to that section, but also make it a 3D view. So we're going to click on that, and it's going to zoom me out, and it's going to kind of do something weird here. So I don't know why it does this by default. Sometimes it acts weird, sometimes it doesn't. What you want to do, if it acts funny like it just did here, is uncrop the view. So we're going to uncrop view here under extents, and then that's going to show my model again. Then I can just kind of drag my cursor, and if I don't orbit my view around, it's going to keep my view flat to my section. Then I can just zoom in, and I can use my middle mouse button to drag and center my view up kind of where I want it. So we'll get it somewhere centered in the middle of the viewport like that. And what's really nice about this is it puts in this section box. So a section box is basically just a 3D object that cuts through your model instead of like the 2D section like we drew. So it'll take and it'll crop your section box and match exactly whatever view you chose. So it put my section box aligned with my section view that I drew already, which is cool. Now, what you can do from this point on is we can lock this view so that it doesn't move. So down here under your settings for the viewport, you have this little house with the lock icon. If you click on that, you can click on Save Orientation and Lock View. And that's going to make it so I can no longer like move this around. So if I try to move my view, it gives me an error and it doesn't let me. And that just ensures that this is not going to like get messed up once you start detailing it. So that's good. And then what we can do is we can rename this. So this is a 3D view, and we can rename this to presentation section perspective, like that. And then I can go ahead and create a view template for this and start tweaking it. So go back to my view template, and we'll start out with architectural presentation 3D. Let me see what that does. Okay, so that's what it gives me by default, and then we'll just duplicate it. So we'll call this one section perspective, or presentation section perspective, like that. And then we will start tweaking this stuff. So first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to mess with the visibility settings here so that these shadows and stuff look a little bit nicer. So that is under model display. Okay, so that's what this button is right here. That is model display. So when I click on that, that's going to bring up the same window that I would get if I click down here. So I'm going to start out by tweaking my shadows. So if I click on shadows here, is it not going to let me? Why is it not letting me? That's weird. This should not be grayed out. Usually it's not. It wasn't a minute ago when I tried it. Alright, let me try it from here and see if that works. Okay, there we go. That's weird. Let's go back to the view template. Shadows. Huh. I have no clue why that is grayed out. I literally just did this like a minute ago and it wasn't. So I don't know if it's going to be different on your end when you try to do this. Off the top of my head, I don't know what setting is causing this to be grayed out and not let me change it. It's very annoying though. Okay. So let's, I'm just gonna not do a view template on this view. So let me undo that really quick. So we're gonna leave the view template off because I don't know why it's behaving like that. And I'm gonna control it here without being in the view template. So I'm gonna set this back to shaded. And then I'm gonna mess with my shadow settings. So we're gonna turn on both of the types of shadows. And then if you want to control how light or dark they are, you just click here under lighting and you modify the ambient light. Usually will do it. So ambient light will bump that up to be brighter. And the sun also has an effect on the brightness. So it's really just a matter of preference. Okay, so just kind of tweak it till you get something that you like a little bit. And then you can, I like to take the shadow setting and knock it way down. And that's going to take the harsh cast shadows and it's going to make them a lot lighter. Like that. So really you don't want to overkill it. You just want to go subtle on those. Or, you know, some cases you might just want to leave them out entirely because having just the ambient shadows kind of adds enough depth and sometimes these get distracting. So if you want them, leave them in, but just keep them like super light. Something like that would be good. Okay, so that's kind of good for these settings. Also, you can change the sun settings and that will change the angle that the harsh shadows are being cast. So you can see when I change that, it kind of changed the angle of the sun. So you can tweak that too if you want to keep the harsh shadows. Okay, so now that we have that, we can start messing with the visibility overrides. So if I go to my visibility window by typing VV on my keyboard, it's going to bring up my overrides. And I want to start by adding in, well first let me get rid of my planting again. So type P and we'll go to the planting, get rid of all that stuff like that. Okay, so let me also hide my section box. So the section box that goes around here, which is basically how my view is being cropped, if you just click off of everything, you can uncheck section box and that's going to hide it. Oh wait, no, that's going to uncrop everything. So we're going to turn that back on. Let me redo that. We just want to hide that, not turn it off entirely. So I'm going to reorient to my section. Okay, zoom back in. There we go. And then we're going to hide that. So you want to select it, then right click on it, and hide in view element. So there it goes away. And then I'm going to relock my view like I had it before. So now I can't move it around. Okay, so that looks good. Now I'm going to start adding in my overrides so that I get like a nice cut through my walls and floors and all that. So going back to my overrides, VV, if I go to my, we'll start out with floor. So if I hit F on my keyboard, it's going to take me down to anything that starts with an F. I'm going to go here to floors, and what we're overriding is the cut pattern of the floor. So if I click on floors, go here to override under cut pattern, and I want to set this to be a solid fill, and the color I'm going to choose black. Okay. Black is really nice because it just kind of hides all this extra like line work and junk where things come together. You can do a different color as well, but it's nicer if you do black. So we'll do apply. That's going to do it for all my floors. Next, we'll do the walls. So we'll go down to walls, override cut pattern, solid fill black. Okay, and then we'll apply that. Okay, so then let's see, what else do I need? You just kind of want to look for elements in here that are not being filled with a hatch pattern. So I can see right here the ceiling. So we'll go to the C's now. Ceiling, override cut pattern. We're going to choose solid fill black again. Okay, that fixes that. And then anything else that you see that's not working, you can kind of click on it and you can see what it is. So if I click on that, you can see this is a pad. So like some kind of like cement slab. So if I go back in, I can go to P, and we'll see if I have pad in there somewhere. I don't. So another way that you can do this, if it doesn't, if you have an object like that doesn't show up in your visibility overrides, you can select it and then right click and go to override graphics and view by element or by category. So I'll probably do by category because that will do it for like all of them throughout the project. And then I can set that here. So I'm going to set solid fill black here, and hopefully that should fix that one. So it didn't fix it in this case, probably because it's like, oh, that's surface pattern. Okay, let's clear that out. Reset. So we want the cut pattern. So solid fill black. There we go. So then it fixes that. Okay, so that's pretty much all of my things that I'm cutting through that I want to show in black. Okay, now what else? So like I said, you can also override like patterns of stuff either on an individual basis or like throughout the entire project like I just did. So in this case, you can see on this family we have, so this is a casework element, and right now it's drawing casework stuff with that kind of rectangular grid hatch. So if you wanted to override that, you can pull up your visibility graphics again, and we could find casework, and we could override now the surface pattern, and we could make that anything we want. So if I wanted it to just be a solid white, for example, I didn't want that, I could set that to solid white, and that should get rid of it like that. Okay, but you can add any pattern to any surface that you want. And you can do this individually too. So for the stair, like I could right click and just do it on a case by case basis for the stair. And you can change that there. And we'll do, again, solid fill. Oops, I want to be under projection for this one because I'm not cutting through it. So let's go up here. Solid fill white. And that gets rid of it on my stair. And now whatever this is. So that's a floor. So override, we'll do by category. So we have solid fill white on that. And this might be a case where we have a painted element. So you can see when I tried to override that by category again, when I pull that up, it tells me, or it told me that I already had an override set on it. Let's see here. Try it again. Okay, there it went away, but it also messed up all my other ones. So that would be a case where you would want to do it by element instead of category. So try this. There we go. So then I got rid of it. Now, like I was saying, the problem with painting materials, I kind of talked about it a little bit last week. But if I were to paint like a material on this wall, for example, and I tied a hatch pattern to that paint material, I'm not 100% sure, but I'm 99% sure that whatever is painted onto the surface will override any of these settings that we're doing here. So that's where painting becomes annoying and why you want to avoid it, because when it comes to like stuff like this and you're trying to change it and you're like, why is that hatch pattern not going away when I'm like overriding it? It's usually because the paint like messes it up. So if you do that on your project and you're setting up a view like this and you're trying to get it to look good and it's like messing up because of the paint material, that's probably why. So you might want to like unpaint it and apply the material a different way, but just something to look out for. Okay, so this is starting to look pretty good. I think I'm going to move to another topic now, but that kind of gives you an idea of how you start setting up kind of the views. So now I'm going to mess with kind of the entourage. So like I said, by default, Revit, they give you garbage. So if I were to show you, for example, what I'm talking about, if I were to use one of their people that they give us, so load family, and then I'm going to go to my entourage. You can see you have these RPC objects. So they only give you two people, male and female. Okay, so we're going to open that, and then we're going to place it. We'll place it right beside my other little guy right here. So let's go back to my presentation section. And then I'm going to set my view to realistic so you can see what it looks like. So these have like a little image of a person tied to them, and they look really bad. They have like a really low quality image, and like they're ugly. They're bad. So you want to avoid them. And so that's what they look like in realistic views. But the 2D views, go back to shaded. Whoops. No, we'll go to hidden line. 2D views, so something that's more graphical, they look like this, which is just, compared to this is way better, right? This looks stupid. So don't use these. I'm going to show you how to make your own custom ones. Okay, so a really good way that I have found to do this is to use SketchUp. And you might not have SketchUp right now because we haven't gotten to it in the class yet, but you could start your free trial of SketchUp. You get a 30-day free trial, I think, if you've never used it before. You could start your free trial of SketchUp, and that's going to last you now through the end of the semester. And you could start doing this if you want to create these 2D people for your presentation. So if I go into SketchUp really quick, and you don't really even need to know much about SketchUp to do this. When you start a new project, they have this default figure in here for scale. And you can use the one that they have in there, but then you can also load in ones from the SketchUp 3D warehouse. The SketchUp 3D warehouse is one of the main reasons why I show you how to use SketchUp, because it has so much like good stuff in there that you can quickly pull into your projects. So it's a really good resource. If you go to extensions, and then window, window 3D warehouse, brings up this this window here, and all you have to do is search for people, and over here on the left side under your like filters, your search parameters, you set the author to SketchUp, and it's going to show you all of the different like 2D and 3D people that they made. So I like to just find these ones of like either a silhouette or a 2D person, not the ones that say 3D because those also look really crappy. But let's just find like sure, we'll do this guy. So I just hit download and it's going to say load this into your project. I'll say yes. And then I can place that in my 3D view for SketchUp. So I already did this with the default guy that comes in. So I'm going to delete him out. And I can show you how I did him as well. But now, if you take your viewport and you align it to a 2D view with these little buttons here, I can align it to a front view, and I can set my camera to be flat by hitting camera, parallel projection. Now it's just a flat 2D view like we had in Revit. You can then go to File, Export, 2D Graphic, and then I'll just call this 2D Man 2. Okay, and then we'll export that out as an AutoCAD DWG file, and then we'll click OK. So now, if we go back to Revit, oh, my Revit crashed on me. Let me open that back up really quick. That's very annoying. I was afraid it would do that. The past few days, I don't know what it is. My Revit is just like not been cooperating with me. Very, very annoying. Okay. Let me open my project back up again. And then let me go back to my section perspective. Okay. Let me fix this really quick. Whoops. Okay. So what we want to do now that we export that out of SketchUp is go to File, and then we're going to make a new family. And then this is going to be the English Imperial Family Library. and we're going to find Entourage right there, and then click open. So now it's going to take us to a blank family file. And if I go to a front elevation now, I can bring my 2D guy in from SketchUp in my front view. So we'll go to Insert, Import CAD, and then we're going to find that file. And 2D Man 2 is the one that I did here. So we'll click on that, and that's going to bring him in right there. Then what we want to do is click on him, and we want to unpin him so that we can move him up so that his feet are sitting on the reference level there. So now he's basically like standing on the ground. And then we are going to click on him, and there's a button up here that says explode. Usually when you bring external files into Revit, you want to avoid exploding them, but in this case it's not that big of a deal because this is a really like not complex object. So if we click on that, we'll click explode, and this might take a minute to process. Oops, I have to first go to create and then set, and then click on where it says set work plane, and we have to go to where it says pick a plane and set it to be front/back. Just like that, because I'm in the front view. So set that to front/back, click OK. Now it's going to let me explode it if I click on it and then click explode. Okay, so then once you do that, you get access to the individual lines inside of this here. So the next step is to select all of the lines, and you want to click on this where it says convert lines, and you want to make sure that it's showing the text that I'm seeing here where it says convert selected model lines to symbolic lines. Okay, so we want all of these lines to be symbolic. Basically, a symbolic line is a line that only shows up in a 2D view, and a model line will show up in a 3D and a 2D view. So it's better to have them as symbolic just because it helps the model run a little bit faster. So that's what we're going to do. And depending on how complex this drawing is, it might take a while. And sometimes it might give you some errors, but usually it'll just tell you that it converted all the lines over. And any errors you get, just hit delete element. It's going to delete those. So there's just a couple little lines somewhere where it didn't like them, and it didn't bring them over exactly. So if I turn off my thick lines, I may be able to see this a little bit better. All right. So the next part of this, which this one is not a very good example because it's not letting me. Oh, there we go. That's what I wanted. So if you hover over one of these lines on the outer edge, you can hit the tab key and you can chain a bunch of them together. So what I basically want to do is I want to hit the tab key until I'm getting the entire outline of this guy turning blue, and then I want to select that. Okay, and with that selected, I'm going to hit Control X to cut that to my clipboard so that I just get the interior lines. Okay, and I want to make sure that I'm having this subcategory section set to something that I want. So this is what allows me to control line weight. So 0 should be fine. I'm going to leave that at 0. And then what we're going to do is create sort of an extrusion, like a 3D extrusion for these lines to sit on top of. So if I go to create, extrusion, I can then paste a line to selected level, click OK, and that's going to paste those lines that I cut out back into the extrusion. And fingers crossed, hopefully it will, if I hit the green check mark, work. Okay, so it did work. So now if I go to a 3D view, you can see I get the outline of my guy in 3D. And if I make him a little bit smaller, if I go to like a side profile, I can make him a little bit smaller so we just get this little cutout. So now we have a solid extrusion of our guy, and we can assign a material parameter to him so we can change his color and stuff. So we're going to click on that, go to material, and I'm just going to name it material. Doesn't really matter. And I'm going to set this to be an instance parameter so that I can like modify different instances of this guy individually. So click OK, and then we'll click OK here. So that looks good. And then what we can do, if we go back to our 2D view, so there's our front view. If you really wanted to, you could make these lines that are inside here model lines. And what that will do, I know I told you not to a minute ago, but what that will do is it will show them in 3D. So if I were to, let me pull this back so that they're in line with the lines there. So now they show up sort of on the surface in a 3D view, and they will show up in a 2D view. So I'll just leave it like that for now because that's fine. Okay, so that looks pretty good. And then I just want to come in here and I want to purge all the junk out of this file so that it when I put it into my Revit project, it won't be like too big and make the project run slow. So I like to go into materials and delete all this stuff out. So we'll click on one and then we'll just hold the delete key and that'll delete all the materials out. And then I go to the purge button here, purge unused. And you can see we have these numbers here, and you just want to check all and then click OK and do that a few times until that says 0. Okay, so then your file is going to be as condensed as it possibly can be. And with that done, you check my my floor plan. We can either leave this as is, or you could even find like a 2D view of a person and you could put that in the 2D view if you wanted. But in this case, we don't really have to worry about it. What I might do is set this so it doesn't appear in my 2D views. So if I click on the extrusion, I can go to this visibility override section here, and I can make it so that this will not show up in a 2D plan view. Click OK. But instead, what will show up can be a 2D line. So I can go to annotate and symbolic line. And like I said, symbolic lines will only show up in 2D. And I can just draw like maybe a circle to represent this guy. So we'll go to the extents of him. We'll get it roughly aligned somewhere like this. So now I have a circle kind of in the same width as my guy. And we'll change the line type on it to like a hidden line, which is good. And this will only show up in 2D views now. So now you can see I don't get an outline here. But if I go back to my plan view and I check what this will look like in the project with my preview visibility, if I hide these, we'll only get this circle in our plan view. So when we place this, it'll be a little bit easier to tell what's what. So there's my circle. And then the last thing I want to do before I load this guy in is check my line weights. So like I said, with your thick lines turned on, you can get a taste of how this is looking. And what's going to look better is having a thicker outline to your entourage, but then a thinner for the details on the inside. So, oh, I missed a spot. I also need this too because that's a hole. So I'm going to select these lines here really quick. And I'm going to cut these to my clipboard. And I'm going to add them to my extrusion. Yep, that's everything. So edit extrusion, and then I'll paste that. There we go. So now what I want to do is override those line weights. So we'll turn on my thick lines again with TL, and then we will go to the visibility settings. And right here, you have this button that says Object Styles. And if you click on that, that's where you can edit your line weights of things. So let me check this really quick, sorry. If I go back to my extrusion and I select these pink lines, oh, never mind. All right, let me just see if I can get this to work here. Okay, let's go back here. I'm going to change the line weight of Entourage. I'm going to bump that up and see. Okay, yeah, it did work. So if you just change Entourage like 2 or 3, that's going to make that bolder on the outside so that this looks better. And then we can load this into our project. Give me 1 second, I'll be right back. All right, so, whoops, I have to save this first. So File, Save As, Family. I'm going to call this 2D Man 2. And we'll just save that to my desktop. And then we'll load it in. And then I'll go back to my ground floor. And there was my first guy. I did him a little bit differently. But now if I go to architecture and I go to component, there's my 2D representation of my other guy. And if I go to my section view, he should show up like that. Let me get rid of all this other stuff. So he shows up like that, which is nice. Now what you can do is if you wanted him to show up sort of as a black fill, like a silhouette, instead of having this line work detail, you can do that a couple different ways. The first way is by editing this material that we have. So we gave him that material. And if I were to create a new material and call this like Entourage or something, or 2D People, I could set this to be like a solid black color under graphics. Or really any color that you want. And then if you hit apply, whoops, no, not there. We're going to set a foreground solid fill black. There we go. And then you get silhouettes, which is pretty cool. The other way to do it, if I edit my first guy, is you can set it as a toggle per family. So if you go to your front elevation view, like I did with the other one, you can take the outline of the guy, like I did for the extrusion, and you can copy that, and then you can go to annotate and go to filled region, and then you can paste this in here within a filled region. hit OK. What a filled region allows you to do is show a 2D hatch on something. So I can edit my filled region to any hatch pattern that I want. So I set mine here to be a solid black, but you could also do like, you know, any other pattern if you wanted to for whatever reason. But we'll go back to solid black, and then we can assign this with it still selected a visibility parameter, sort of like what we did with that shelving unit that we did in the first module. So I already have one here. Let me delete it out and show you how I made that. Delete this out. So we'll select that. We'll go here to visible, and we'll click on the associate parameter button, and then we'll click new parameter, and we'll call this black fill. And we'll set it to be an instance parameter so that we can do it per object. And then we'll click on OK. And now, let me move the category. Let's set this to like construction or something. Okay, so that now that'll appear all the way on the top of the list. Now we have this little toggle, and if I turn that on and off, it will just turn the black fill on and off. So if I want a silhouette, I could just have it with a toggle, which is pretty cool. So let me load him back in. And then we'll give him the, we'll give him the black fill. And since we did that as an instance parameter, if I were to copy him, I could just uncheck that for his copy. So that's the nice thing about the instance parameter, is you can just change it from one to the other. But now that I did this, this is where it's kind of cool with it tying into Enscape. So you can just add in all of your 2D people, and you can kind of follow that process for, you know, maybe 3 or 4 different 2D people to fill up your elevation view. And then if you go into Enscape and you go to the asset library, this is where you can pull in all of their custom 3D models to look better in your renderings. You can go to people. Whoops. Actually, just go down here. There you go, people. And then you can find a person that you want to associate with your custom entourage family. So let's say every time we have our first 2D guy in the project, we in Enscape want to show, let's see, let's find a good one. All right, we'll do this guy since he has his arms crossed. We'll go here. You have these 3 little dots. You can click on Link Revit Family to Asset. And then you can search for your guy. So I set this guy right here to 2D Man. So I'll click on 2D Man and then click OK. And that's going to link the two together. And then we'll do the same thing for the other one. So let's say every time this 2D guy shows up, let's find somebody who's walking maybe. See, that guy's on the phone. Let's just do him. He's on the phone. So we'll link that to 2D Man 2. Click OK. Oh, come on. That's annoying. Let me open up Enscape first. I'm going to pull up my section perspective and then hit start. Let this load. Hopefully my computer doesn't crash again. Okay, so you can see there how it replaced my 2D guy with, whoops, that Enscape asset, which is cool. Just does it automatically for you. Now, let me see if I can get that to link again. Enscape, asset library. Let's go back to people. Let's just pick a different one. Maybe it wasn't doing it because it didn't like the one I chose. Oh, shoot. Nope, don't want that. People. 3 dots. Link. Okay. Why the heck is it saying that? That's weird. Oh, you know what? I wonder if it's because I made this invisible. Let me try showing this in 2D and see if that'll work. It's weird. Let me delete him out. Try one more time. I have no idea why that is not working. Well, it worked for my other guy, so it should work. But I didn't have that issue when I made it with this guy. So if you follow what I'm doing here and you try it, hopefully it should work for you. But all you gotta do is make the 2D person, and then you can just link it to the asset library like that. It's very annoying that it's not working. Let me try pulling this up and let's see if it'll update when I change it. So let me try changing the current guy to a different one. All right, we'll try this guy. Link, and then I'll choose my 3D man 1. See if it changes. Yeah, so there it works. So I don't know, it didn't like my other one that I made, but that's kind of the way that you do it. All right, so that's how you make custom entourage and have something that looks good. Whoops, back to my Revit view go. That's how you have something that looks kind of good in a 2D view for your 2D presentations. But then it's also going to look good in Enscape because it'll swap those assets out. Another thing that I should have mentioned, now that I'm thinking of it, if we do that section perspective, this is technically a 3D view. So I'm not going to have line work showing up on my guy. So when I did that whole thing with the line work here, I actually do think that I want to make this model lines instead of symbolic lines, because then they will show up correctly. So if I convert all these over to model, that will then show up in like a 3D view, like a section perspective. So if you're wanting to do this and have it show up like it's showing here. You'll want to make sure that those are model lines, and then it should fix if I don't have him backwards. Okay. There we go. So I had him flipped around backwards. But now you can see in my 2D view, or my 3D view, I get the line work because it's set to model lines now. And then you could set him to be a black color with the material since it's a 3D view. So again, just really quickly, we'll set this to, now since it's 3D, have to put this under the appearance tab. So we'll go here and hit apply. And now you can see I get a solid black person like that. All right, so that's how we set up our entourage and kind of our views to get something that looks a little bit nicer for presentation. The exact same thing applies to just regular elevation views and floor plan views. Okay, and you can even do the same thing with the floor plan here, where you you align a 3D view to a floor plan. Okay, so if I go here to my floor plan, I can think of the best way to do this. Let's go to a building elevation. Hide in view category. And then create a camera view here from an elevation looking down. So now we're looking down at the top of a building, and I can align this, orient to a view to a floor plan. So if I orient that to ground floor and do the same things that I did for the elevation, I can get a 3D floor plan view. Let's go to my shadows. Kind of like that, right? So you can do the exact same thing there, and you can get some really cool looking plan views as well. Right. Over an Enscape, so that's what I would do for your kind of 2D graphical drawings. Over an Enscape, we get some controls to kind of do the same thing but more realistically. So we'll pull this back up. Under my view settings, up here at the top, visual settings, you have control over the camera. So for a view like this, like a section perspective or a perspective plan view, you want to set this to a 2-point perspective. Otherwise, sometimes the regular perspective makes things look a little bit weird in terms of like your vertical lines and stuff. So I always set that to 2-point perspective. And then if you don't want this to be any perspective on it, you can change this to orthographic, and it's going to make it just a rendered version of a flat elevation or section view or floor plan view, which is pretty cool. So you can also use Enscape for that if you just want it totally flat. But it's cool because you can just switch between the two, very easily. Right? So that's kind of cool. Let me see what else here. So let's go over a little bit of how to export drawings and then like tweak them maybe in Photoshop or Illustrator, just so that you get that kind of idea of going from this to your plan, or not your plan, your presentation board. So if I were to pull up my drawing again, right? let's say that I'm happy with this at this point, and I want to pull this out and start editing it, like in Photoshop, or I want to put this on my board. So what would be the best way to get this out of Revit? I want to get rid of that material first. There we go. All right, so if I want to get this out of Revit, I'm going to go to File and then Print. And then you should have a PDF printer on your computer by default. Hopefully you have Adobe PDF. If you don't have Adobe PDF, you should download Adobe Acrobat from the Creative Cloud app. And I'm just going to assume you all have Creative Cloud because most likely you have Photoshop. So if you have a subscription, just load up Creative Cloud and make sure that you download Acrobat. Because it's going to make your life a whole lot easier when it comes to organizing your drawings and exporting stuff out. So download Acrobat, then you'll get these options here for Adobe PDF. And we're going to want to modify our properties and set our Adobe PDF page size to be at least as big as your presentation board. So your presentation board's probably going to be around an ArcD size, which is 24 by 36. I would say bump it up to one above whatever your size is. So we'll go like ArcE, for example, because you can always scale the image down and make it look better, but it's very hard to scale a small image up and make it look good scaled up. So we're going to kind of add more detail in so that it looks better in the end when we go to put it on the board. So I'm going to bump that up to ArcE, click OK, and then I'm going to set my print range to be the visible portion of the current window, and then I'm going to preview this to make sure that it looks all right. All right, so that preview's looking pretty good. I don't believe it's gonna... So it might draw some little errors here, so... Oh no, it does look good. So you can just see, zooming in, how like high resolution that this is going to be when it exports out. Okay, so we're getting quite a bit of detail, and the computer's kind of lagging. So I'm going to close out of the preview. I think that looks good. So let me go back to my print settings. That all looks okay. And then I'm going to choose the file where I want to save this. So we'll choose the path. So I'm going to hit browse there, and I'm just going to save this to my desktop. This will be section perspective. Okay, and then we'll save that and then say okay. And again, I'll go to my desktop and I'll save that there. Give it a minute. Come on. It's really thinking hard about this one, I guess. While that's going, I'm going to hop it back over to Enscape. I'm just going to let that, we'll see if that ever goes through. Don't know why it's taking so long. I'm going to hop over to Enscape and talk about these settings really quick. So within the visual settings, we get some options here. First of all, add outlines. If you like that, kind of looks nice if you're going through for something that's a little less realistic. We have view modes. So a white mode is just going to make everything white without material. Again, if you're kind of in a concept phase, that's going to look maybe a little bit better if you're not wanting to show materials on things. But for presentation, you'll want to show materials probably. And then field of view is going to make things more or less dramatic. So if I were to go to a really small field of view, that's going to zoom me way in. And then if I zoom out, you can see my perspective is flattened out a little bit. So the depth, for example, here, if I were to bump that back up, like kind of watch what my perspective does. If I do that and then I zoom back in, whoops, my perspective is now a lot more dramatic. Okay, so that's what your field of view slider is going to control. So it's kind of your preference, like what you like. If you want it to look really over the top and distorted like that, go for a higher field of view, higher field of view and zoom in. Or if you want it to look a little bit more natural, go down to like 30 and then zoom out, and then it'll look a little bit more like flattened and natural looking. Image is just gonna control different settings with hue, saturation, all that. Pretty self-explanatory. Bloom, or all these effects down here, you don't have to worry about some of these. Motion blur is just how it looks when you're moving around. So if I move around here and I have motion blur on, it's going to make it look more smooth. Lens flare, that's going to affect like your sunlight. So if I were, I don't know where my sun is. Where's my sun? He disappeared on me. Anyway, if you have a view where the sun is like right in your eyes, the lens flare is going to accentuate that and make it look like what a camera does. Let's see if I can find the sun. My sun is literally gone. It's funny. Yeah, whatever. That's what a lens flare will do. It'll make it look like you're being blinded by the sun, basically. I usually turn that off. But if you have a view where the sun is coming in, you can turn it on and you can kind of see what it does and if you like it or not. But I usually leave it off. Bloom, that is going to control like the brightness and how it it's like the light intensity kind of. So when you turn on bloom, anything that is a light object is going to look like it's glowing, which kind of makes it look a little bit more realistic because that's what cameras do when they take a photo of something that's bright. They will add bloom to it. So I recommend turning bloom up just a little bit to make it look a little bit better. For a view like this, I probably wouldn't, right? Since this is just a 2D view, but like a 3D view, I probably would. This, turn it off. Just leave that off because all it does is it adds like, I don't know if you can really see it, like around the edges of stuff, it makes it like fuzzy. Like right there, you can really see it, how that turned like pink. Yeah, as I do that, you can see how it gets like pink and like fuzzy. Yeah, just leave that off. It doesn't add anything good. Sun brightness, that's going to make that more or less intense. Shadow sharpness is kind of interesting. So if you look at the shadows back here, you can make those more or less pronounced or more or less detailed. So if we turn it all the way down, you get really soft shadows, which looks nice and realistic. But then for maybe like a 2D view like this, maybe you would want sharper shadows. I don't know. But that'll make them really harsh like we had in the default Revit view. Artificial light brightness, that's going to control the intensity of any lights that you have. So you can see when I turn that up, it's adding in the actual lighting on the walls. So that's just a nice like toggle to control that, so you get a little bit nicer looking elevations. And then the ambient brightness, usually I find that this doesn't do too much. You can mess with it, but I've never really been able to see much of a difference playing with the ambient light brightness. So I usually don't touch that too much. These other things are kind of just for video rendering, but don't worry about wind or anything for a 2D view. Under sky, we have the option for a white background. So if you're doing a 2D view to go on a sheet or something, like or to go on your board, I usually like to turn on white background for something like this. And then your horizon source, that's going to be your actual background. So if I turn that back on, we can do like desert or forest, whatever. They have all kinds of ones built in. And then you can make your own custom ones too, and they have a tutorial for that on their website. But these backgrounds also change the lighting condition inside of the model. So like if I turned on this background here that has a lot of green in it, when I turn on white background instead, or no, if I change this back to like clear, we should see some difference on the interior lighting condition. So usually it'll make it more or less green based on what's around it. So if I don't want a lot of like green color spilling in, I'll usually just set this to something neutral, and then I'll set it to white background so it doesn't mess with it. Clouds, obviously, just going to change that. And the clouds will actually make it brighter or darker inside of your rendering. So you can see when I turn those up, it makes it darker because it's like a cloudy day. So you can turn those off. And that's pretty much it for like the 2D settings, though. It's pretty self-explanatory. So I'm gonna go ahead and render one of these Enscape views out here really quick. So we'll turn that down, and then let's mess with our exposure, get that dialed in, looking better. Looks pretty good. Okay, something like that's probably fine. And then if you like your setting and you say, okay, this is how I always want my section perspectives to show up, or this is how I always want my floor plans or my my regular perspectives to show up, you can create a preset and you can call this like section perspective. And this will save there, and it will retain those settings so that you can use them in other projects or apply them to other views. So you can just make a few different presets of all these settings, and then you can switch between them, and you can see what you like. So go back here. So I already had one in there. So I'm just going to rename this custom one. We'll delete out section perspective. Come on. Delete. And we'll rename this one section perspective. Okay. And then when you're ready to render this out, you can go to your visual settings again, and under output, you can change the resolution. By default, it's set to full HD, which is actually not super big. I would recommend doing Ultra HD. And right here where it says under image, like export, all this other stuff, check that on because that will help you in Photoshop. And then the file format, just leave it as PNG. That'll work a little bit better. Then you want to set a folder for where the rendered images will go. So I'm going to go to my desktop, and we'll create a new folder there, and this will be my Enscape renderings. Okay. And then that should be good for these settings. So I'm going to close out of that, and then when we're ready to render, we go up here to where it says screenshot, and you can do one. If you have one view set, you can just click on this and do that one view. Or if you have a bunch of views already set up and you're ready to render multiple out at one time, you come up here to batch rendering, and you can do a check, and you can check all the 3D views that you want to render out, and it'll just throw them all into that folder and render them for you, which is cool. I'm just going to do this one, and we're going to save it to my Enscape renderings folder, and I'll call this my section perspective. All right. And it looks like my PDF never went through, so we'll have to see why that is. But we'll give this a second. It's going to render it. All right, cool. So I'm going to close Enscape before my computer blows up on me. And then this, I don't know why that didn't work. So, or maybe it did. Nope, did not. Let me try that again. And get that to export. Sometimes if it's not working, you can try a different PDF printer. So in this case, I might try the Microsoft one. They don't have as many sizes in here though. The biggest one they have in here is Tabloid. So let me try that really quick and just see if I can get it to output something. So if you come down here under the print setup, sometimes you get options to customize the size of the piece of paper that it's printing to. So here I do not get that option. All right, we'll just leave that as is. And we'll see if we can get that to export. Looks like it went through. Okay, so that one worked. You can see though it's not as high of resolution, so when I zoom in it kind of looks a little bit worse. So I don't know why it didn't work on mine for Adobe PDF, but I would do what I did on your end, and I would use the Adobe PDF because you can get a lot higher quality. Oh, you know what? I'll bet it is. I'll bet I know why I didn't do it. Let's go to Adobe PDF again, properties. Whoops. Adobe PDF, properties, paper quality, advanced. Okay. So if you come in here, and I think this is probably why, properties under Adobe PDF, layout, advanced. Right here you have this setting for print quality, and it's set to 1200 dpi, which is like crazy huge. And when this is set really high, and I don't know why it does it by default, like the application won't be able to process it and it won't actually be able to export it. So I would recommend knocking this down to 300 dpi tops. Okay, which 300 dpi might even be overkill for this. Maybe even 144, but I'll do 300 just to ensure that I have enough quality. And then I want to make sure again that my paper size is set to Arc E, and hopefully that'll fix it. Okay, so then we'll save that. See if it goes through. It also could just be my computer is messed up. Could be something with my computer because this one doesn't really want to go through as well. But if you can get to export out as like an ARC D or R key, then you should be in good shape. But like I said, mine isn't going. So we'll cancel that. Really quick, we have like 15 minutes left. Let me pop open Photoshop to show you what Enscape gave us. Can go to open, and we will go to the desktop, Enscape renderings. So Enscape, when it saved that, because I checked that little box to include those extra types of image files, it gives me all this stuff here. And what these do are they let you edit in Photoshop way easier. So if I just open my default rendering like this, I can go to, let me see if I can remember this, File, Automate, not Automate, Scripts, Load Files into Stack, and then here in this window where it says Load Layers, you go to Browse, you go to this here, and then you click on all these. So we're going to click on this one, and we're going to hold Control and click on the rest of them. So we have all of these ones here. Actually, I don't need this black one, so we'll get rid of that. But we have 1, 2, 3. Now I can click on OK. It's going to add them to this list, and then I can click OK here. And it will take all of those, and it will put them into a single Photoshop file. Oh shoot, it didn't include this one. It'll put them into a single Photoshop file with each one being their own layer, okay, so that you don't have to manually put them together. So I'm just going to drag this one in on top so that they're all in the same file. But now you get your regular rendering, and then you get all these other ones here. So this first one is called the alpha mask. This will let you very easily edit like the sky, for example. So if I were to really quickly on Google grab a background image, just grab something really quickly. Okay, this looks good. Whoops. Okay, so I downloaded a picture. Let's drop this into Photoshop on top. So I get this background image, right? So I'm going to expand this so that it's filling the entire frame here. And then I'm going to pull this down underneath of my rendering image like this. And I'll turn my rendering back on. Now what I can do is I can hide these to go back to my black image here. And then I can use my magic wand and I can select the black. Whoops. Let's make sure we're on the correct layer. I want to set this to make sure contiguous is off so that it will select all the black. If I didn't have that on, or if I had it on, it would only select the area black I'm clicking. I want to do all of this. And then we can apply this as a layer mask to our rendering. So if I go to my rendering now, I can click on, whoops, I can click on my layer mask button down here, right there. And then I can invert the mask, so it does it backwards by default. So if I click on my layer mask and then I click Control I, and then I turn on my background, you can see now very easily I was able to cut out the background and put my own custom background in. And then we can just crop this down a little bit. So if I didn't want all that other stuff in there, just crop that down. But the nice thing is with them separate and applying that as a layer mask, I can still control, whoops, let me zoom out a little bit so it's easier to see what I'm doing. I can still control the background and I can adjust this independently behind my picture. So I can get that somewhere that lines up a little bit better where I like it, and then I can just apply it. And then any other extra stuff, like if I didn't want this grass, you know, you can just come in with your marquee tools and you can cut that out of there. Go back to my layer mask, and then to add to your layer mask, hopefully they taught you this, by the way. If they did not, I might have to do a video on Photoshop because hopefully you understand these Photoshop basics. We used to teach this, we used to teach Photoshop like in depth, and be a real shame if you didn't know how to do all this stuff. So if I go to edit and fill, and I set this to black, so we'll go to color and we'll set this to be black. That will cut out and hide that so that I'm just seeing my background image. So then you could do that over here as well, right, with your polygon lasso. Just gonna follow this outline. And we'll cut all the way down to there. And then I'll do the same thing, select my layer mask, edit, fill, and we will do black like that. All right, so hopefully you get the idea there. Now that I have that cut out though, something else that I can do is, if I go back to this, let's say I want to be able to add just a thick outline to the perimeter of the building to give it a little bit more depth. If I hold Control and I click on my layer mask, I can just select the outline of the building, and then I'm going to create a new layer, and I'm going to go to Edit, Fill, and we're going to set this to be white. Okay. So now it'll fill the building in with white, and then we set this now to be, we set the blending mode here to be multiply, and that's going to hide the white. But what it allows us to do is, if we go to our layer effects down here under effects, we go to stroke, I can then apply to the outside a black stroke to this, right? And it's going to allow me to get like an outline so that this pops a little bit more. And then you can change like opacity and stuff. And if I don't want that showing up on these back windows, I can always select those and I can fill white. And that's going to get rid of them. So that's a really easy way to add that. And then you can go in here and you can add in your black poche so that you get your depth with your section cut through your walls. And to do that really easily, that's where you can tap into these other layers that were exported. So if I pull this one to the top here, we have a couple, and these will generate random colors based on materials or objects. So this one right here is the object ID layer. You can see it right there in the name. This one is the material ID. So basically what this one will do is it'll look at every unique object in the Revit file and it'll give it a color so that when you're in Photoshop and say I just wanted to edit like let's see, let's say this kitchen island, I wanted to change something about that. I could just magic wand that, and then I can, this is a case where you wouldn't want contiguous on because now it's selecting things other places. So if you turn contiguous on, now it's just selecting the island, and then I can come back to my rendering and I can, for instance, make an adjustment to it. So if I image adjustments, brightness contrast, you can now just make a adjustment to one little thing in the image or a particular object because you have this mask that's allowing you to select that really quickly and easily. The other one is doing it by material. So let's say I had a material applied to one of my objects that I wanted to tweak something about. So maybe up here, like this wood. Let's say I wanted this wood to pop a little bit more. If I went in here to my material and I selected just this wood, whoops, you have to be on the right layer. And then I'm going to want to turn down my tolerance so that I can really get just that wood. Oh, actually, no, I do want it everywhere. So you can see I selected that material there, but it's selecting it everywhere because it's doing it everywhere it exists within this image. So if I were to turn that off, everything that I selected there should be that same wood material. So now if I were to like add an adjustment for this, if I go back to my rendering layer, layer 1, I can add in an adjustment layer, and then let's do an exposure like that. Now I can tweak this and I can pump up the vibrancy and stuff of that wood really easily. So that's why you want to export out those rendering layers, because it just makes it a lot easier to go in and make whatever changes to individual parts of the image, right? So that's what you use those for. Makes your life a lot easier. But then, what I would do is I would put a layer here on top, and I would come in either using these to get the cuts, or in this case, it doesn't look like it's going to be very helpful. So I would just come in with a rectangular tool, and I would start coming across here and filling in. Whoops, I don't want the crop tool. Try that again. I want rectangle marquee. Come in here. And then select this. And then we'll edit, fill, and we'll do black. And then we can just, go around the image and basically just do that to all of them. And it doesn't take that long because you don't have that many things to do. But that's kind of how I would treat something like this. And really quickly, without a lot of work, you can get something that looks pretty nice. And before time runs out in a couple minutes, let me open up my section perspective. Yes. And actually something that you can do, if you didn't make any tweaks to your camera settings inside of Enscape, and you were just to export out this view and then export out the other view, sometimes you can get it so that you can overlay the two and you can actually get your cuts and stuff like that. In this case, it's not going to work, but you can open up this file here too, and you can kind of do the same thing. And for views like this, something that you're going to want to keep in mind is how this is going to look on a board. So you want to get rid of the background. So use the magic wand, and select everything that's white and then just delete it out so that you get that. And then also this little extra line that I have here. You want to cut all the background stuff out. Like that. And then I'll crop this down to there. Looks pretty good. And then the nice thing is if you save this, let me crop the top down a little bit too, like that. So if you save this file, save as, nope, export, file export. You want to do this as a PNG file because it will maintain the background being deleted out. So we'll call this one perspective Revit, like that. If I were to open InDesign, just going to really quickly, let's create a new ArcD size file. So it's going to be 24 by 36. Okay. Let's go to place, file, and then place. Throw that on our view. View. Set this to be a high quality so you can see it a little bit better. Okay, and then the nice thing is it preserves the missing background. So if I were to add in some kind of graphic here, and then set this, let's get rid of that extra thing. Set this to come in front, arrange, bring to front. There you go. You can see that because we did a PNG, cuts out the background and it maintains that, so you don't get that weird like white cropped thing that you'll see sometimes. So make sure you're deleting out your backgrounds in Photoshop and then you're exporting as a PNG, and then when you bring it here into InDesign to start laying out your board, you can start overlaying graphics and stuff, and then it'll look a lot better, like it's actually jumping off the page at you. And you can also, really quickly, we're close on time, you can add those effects to the objects directly inside of InDesign instead of Photoshop. So if I went to Object and Effects, you can add in like strokes and shadows and stuff here too. So if I went here and I went to, don't know where my stroke is. Let's try a shadow. There you go. You can apply shadows, and you can do all those effects in InDesign too to give some more depth. But yeah, that's kind of just a very basic, quick crash course of setting up drawings in Revit and also using Enscape, exporting them out, bringing them into Photoshop, doing some quick tweaks, and then throwing them into InDesign and putting your board together. All right, so that will do it for this week. I know it was a lot of stuff. Hopefully that there were some useful things in there that we covered that you can pick up on to use for your project. And yeah, the rest of this week, just make sure that you're working on the Lab 2, Part 2 stuff and get that all done. And then next week, we're going to be diving a little bit more into the actual stuff for Lab 3, which is going to cover panorama rendering. And we're going to be looking at putting together sort of a three-dimensional panoramic tour that you can send to people with just a URL. So it's really cool. So if you think of like Google Street View and how you can jump in on there and kind of jump around between points and then like look around you on your web browser, it's kind of the same thing that we'll be doing with Enscape. So should be kind of fun, but that's what we'll be doing next week. All right, so that's all I got. Have a good rest of your week, and as always, email me if you have questions about anything. And Lily, I will get back to you on the room tag thing. All right, I'm going to look into that now, and then I'll send you an email. Yep, you too.